Kept running, the forest a maze of shadows and light. I woke in my Jeep, parked at the edge of the highway, my clothes soaked with sweat, my gear gone. The sun was high, the forest silent again. My GPS was blank, its memory wiped, and my phone showed no signal, no record of the photos I'd taken. I drove back to Bangor, not stopping until I reached my apartment. I told Karen I'd gotten sick, couldn't finish the job. She didn't push, but her voice was strange, distant, like she knew I was lying. I tried to forget the Lantern Road, but it's in me now. At night, I hear the hum, faint but growing, and I see the lanterns in my dreams, their flames flickering behind my eyes. I've found scratches on my arms, thin and precise, like they were carved by something sharp and deliberate. Last week, I found a lantern on my doorstep, small and rusted, its flame burning softly. I didn't touch it, but I heard her voice, the woman's whispering from inside, "He'll come back." I've moved twice since then, but the hum follows and the lanterns keep appearing in my porch, in my car, outside my window. I don't know what they are or what they want, but I know they're not done with me. If you're ever in Maine, if you see a dirt road lined with lanterns, don't follow them. Don't look at the flames. Because once you do, the road doesn't let you go. The hollow bell. The bell rang at 3:17 a.m. A single low chime that echoed through the empty streets of Coldwater, Montana, and woke me from a dead sleep. I'm Theo Grant, a mechanic by trade. Not the kind of guy who spooks easily, but that sound it wasn't right. It came from the old church at the edge of town, a sagging relic no one stepped foot in since the 80s. The bell shouldn't have rung. Its clapper was long gone, stolen, or rusted away, and the church was boarded up, left to rot in the shadow of the Bitterroot Mountains. I lay in bed, my heart pounding, waiting for another chime. It didn't come. Just silence, thick and heavy, like the town was holding its breath. Coldwater's the kind of place where nothing happens. A gas station, a diner, a handful of houses, and a population you can count on both hands. I'd moved here 2 years ago, running from a bad breakup and a worse debt, figuring a nowhere town was the perfect place to disappear. But that night, the bell's chime stuck with me, a splinter in my mind. I couldn't shake the feeling it was calling me. The next morning, I drove to the church, my pickup rattling over the frost-cracked road. The air was sharp, smelling of pine and wet earth, with a faint metallic tang I couldn't place. The church loomed ahead, its steeple leaning slightly, like it was tired of standing. The windows were boarded, the paint peeling in long gray strips, and the door was padlocked, though the chain was rusted, brittle. I walked the perimeter, my boots crunching on frozen grass, looking for signs of a prank kids, maybe, or some drunk messing around. Nothing. Just the bell tower, its silhouette stark against the gray sky, and that uneasy feeling like eyes watching from the shadows. I stopped at Mabel's diner for coffee, hoping to shake off the chill. Mabel, a wiry woman with eyes like a hawk, poured me a cup and leaned on the counter. "Heard the bell last night," she said, not asking, just stating it like fact. "You check it out?" "Yeah," I said, sipping the bitter brew. "Nothing up there. You know what's with that bell?" Her face tightened, her fingers drumming on the counter. "Folks say it rings when someone's marked." Old story, not worth repeating. She turned away, busying herself with a coffee pot, but I caught the flicker of fear in her eyes. I pressed her, but she clammed up. And the other regular sand old man, named Gus, and a trucker passing through weren't any help. Gus just muttered about bad winters and went back to his eggs. The trucker shrugged, his eyes darting nervously. "Heard it too, huh? Stay away from that place, Theo. Ain't nothing good comes from messing with that bell." I drove back home, the diner's warmth fading as the cold crept back into my bones. Mabel's words, someone's Marquetta code in my head, and I couldn't help but wonder who. The town felt different now, the silence heavier, the shadows longer. That night, I couldn't sleep. The memory of the bell's chime lingered, low and mournful, like a warning I didn't understand. Around midnight, I heard another sound of faint scratching, like nails on wood, coming from my front door. I grabbed the baseball bat I kept by the bed and crept to the living room, my pulse racing. The scratching stopped as I approached, but when I opened the door, there was nothing, just a single mark on the frame, a thin, deliberate scratch, like someone had dragged a knife across it. The next day, I went back to the church, this time with tools. The padlock on the door gave way with a quick pry, and I stepped inside, the air thick with dust and the sour smell of decay. The pews were splintered, the hymnals moldy, their pages stuck together. I climbed the rickety stairs to the bell tower, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The bell was there, massive and tarnished, its surface etched with strange symbol spirals, jagged lines, shapes that seemed to shift when I looked too long. There was no clapper, just as I'd thought, but the inside of the bell was smooth, polished, like it had been cleaned recently. On the floor beneath it was a small pile of ash, still warm, smelling faintly of something sweet and rotten. I took photos, my hands shaking, and sent them to a friend, an amateur historian named Rachel. She called me an hour later, her voice tight. "Those symbols aren't random, Theo. They're old, pre-Christian, maybe older. Found on stones around here, tied to stories about the land choosing people. The bell, it's not just a bell, it's a signal. You need to leave." I laughed it off, told her she'd been reading too many ghost stories. But that night, the bell rang again. 3:17 a.m., one chime, deep and resonant, vibrating in my chest. I didn't go back to the church. Instead, I searched the house, looking for more scratches. I found them on the windowsills, the back door, even the mirror in my bathroom. Each one was identical, precise, like a signature. I didn't sleep. The next morning, I went to the town library, a cramped room in the community center with books older than me. I dug through local history, finding scraps about Coldwater's past. The church was built in 1883 on land the native tribes avoided, calling it hollow ground. There were stories of disappearance as loggers, settlers, kids going back centuries, all linked to the church, all after the bell rang. The most recent was a hunter, vanished last spring, his rifle found under the bell, surrounded by ash. The article called it a suicide, but the details didn't add up no body, no note, just the ash and those same strange symbols carved into the stock of his gun. I started noticing things in town. The way people avoided my eyes, the way conversations stopped when I walked into the diner. Gus, the old man, cornered me outside the gas station, his breath sour with whiskey. "You heard it twice now," he said, his voice low. "It don't ring for everyone. You stay, it'll ring again." And then he trailed off, his hands trembling, and walked away. That night, the scratching came again. Louder, more insistent, moving from the door to the walls, like something circling the house. I turned on every light, checked every window, but saw nothing. Just more scratches, deeper now, some forming patterns that matched the symbols on the bell. I called Rachel again, and she sent me a scanned page from an old journal written by a preacher in 1890. He described the bell ringing on its own, calling people to the church where they'd join the hollow. He wrote of a presence in the ground, something that listened and chose, something that fed on those who answered its call. His last entry was a single line, "It knows my name." I decided to leave. Packed a bag, filled my truck with gas, and planned to drive to Missoula by dawn. But the bell rang again, 3:17 a.m., and this time, the scratching was inside the house. I grabbed my bat, my flashlight, and searched every room. Nothing. But the mirror in my bathroom was uncovered, and in it my reflection wasn't right. My face, but not my expression. My mouth was moving, whispering words I couldn't hear, my eyes too dark, too empty. I smashed the mirror, the glass shattering, but the whispering didn't stop. It was in my head now, my name over and over, "Theo, come." I drove to the church, not knowing why, only that I had to. The door was open, the padlock gone. Inside, the air was cold, thick with that sweet rotten smell. The bell tower was lit, not by my flashlight, but by a faint glow from the bell itself, its symbols pulsing with a sickly light. I climbed the stairs, my legs heavy, like wading through water. The bell was ringing, not a chime, but a low, continuous hum, vibrating in my bones. Beneath it, the ash pile was larger, and in it, I saw fragments bone, cloth, a watch with a cracked face, stopped at 3:17. I don't know how long I stood there, staring at the bell, the hum filling my mind, drowning out my thoughts. Faces appeared in the shadows, people I didn't know, their eyes hollow, their mouths moving in sync with the hum. They weren't there, not really, but I felt them, their presence pressing against me, urging me to stay. I saw my own face among them, not a reflection, but me, standing in the tower, my hands covered in ash. I ran. The road out of Coldwater was empty, the mountains looming like sentinels. My truck's engine sputtered, but I kept driving, the hum fading but never gone. I'm in Missoula now, crashing in a cheap motel, but the scratches keep appearing on my door, my car, my skin. They're faint, but they're there, forming those same symbols. The bell's hum follows me, a whisper in my dreams, calling me back. Last night, I found ash on my pillow, warm and sweet-smelling, and a note in my own handwriting, "Come to the hollow." I don't know what the bell is, or what lives in Coldwater's ground, but it knows me, it chose me, and it's waiting. If you're ever in Montana, if you hear a bell at 3:17 a.m., don't listen. Don't go to the church. Because once the hollow calls your name, it never stops. The Silent Ward. The scream woke me at 2:43 a.m. It wasn't Humanot exactly, but it cut through the stillness of Haven's End, a speck of a town in northern Wisconsin, like a blade through silk. I'm Avery Cole, a night shift nurse at St. Agnes Hospital, a crumbling brick building on the edge of town that should have been shut down years ago. The scream came from the third floor, the locked ward no one talks about, the one we call the silent ward because its patients never speak. I was alone at the nurse's station, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, when that sound hit me, raw and jagged, like something tearing itself apart. I froze, my pen hovering over a chart, my heart slamming against my ribs. The hospital was quiet again, but the air felt wrong thick, heavy, like it was pressing down on me. Haven's End is a nowhere place, a cluster of sagging houses and a diner that smells of grease and despair, nestled in a valley where the pines grow too tall and the winters last too long. St. Agnes is the town's lifeline, the only hospital for miles, but it's a relic leaky pipes, flickering lights, and a smell of antiseptic that can't mask the rot underneath. I'd taken the job 6 months ago, desperate for work, after a messy divorce, left me with nothing but debt and a car that barely ran. The night shift suited me. I liked the quiet, the way the world felt softer in the dark. But the silent ward, room 317, was different. It was off limits, its door always locked, its charts missing from the system. The other nurses whispered about it, stories of patients who didn't exist, of sounds no one could explain, but I'd never heard anything myself. Until that scream. I checked the monitors, my hands trembling. The third floor was dark, the cameras glitchy, showing only static where room 317 should have been. I radioed security, but Ed, the guard, was out back smoking, his voice crackling through the static. Probably just pipes, Avery. Old place creaks like hell. I wanted to believe him, but pipes don't scream. I grabbed my flashlight and headed to the stairwell, the air growing colder with each step. The hospital smelled of bleach and something sweeter, like overripe fruit, faint but persistent. My sneakers squeaked on the linoleum, the sound too loud in the silence. The third floor was a maze of locked doors and abandoned rooms, the air stale, the walls stained with watermarks that looked like faces if you stared too long. Room 317 was at the end of the hall, its door different from the other steel, not wood, with a keypad instead of a lock. I'd never seen it open, never seen a doctor or nurse go in. I pressed my ear to the door, holding my breath. Nothing. Just the hum of the hospital, the distant drip of a faucet. Then, a faint scratching like nails on metal, slow and deliberate, coming from inside. I backed away, my flashlight beam shaking, and noticed something new, a small symbol carved into the doorframe, a spiral with jagged edges. Like a wound. It hadn't been there yesterday. I didn't sleep when my shift ended. The scream stayed with me, looping in my head, and that symbol burned behind my eye. I drove to the diner, the only place open at 6 a.m., and asked Margie, the waitress, about the hospital. She'd lived in Haven's End her whole life, her face lined like old leather. "St. Agnes ain't right," she said, pouring me coffee that tasted like tar. "Built on bad land. Folks used to say the ground there listens. She wouldn't say more, just shook her head and muttered about keeping your distance. I couldn't let it go. That afternoon, I went to the town library, a cramped room in the community center with books that smelled of mildew. I found a history of Haven's End, a thin volume from the 70s. St. Agnes was built in 1910 on land donated by a reclusive family, the Harts, who'd vanished by 1920. There were stories of strange illnesses, patients who went mad, doctors who quit without explanation. The silent ward was mentioned once, in a footnote, room 317, reserved for special cases, closed to staff. No details, just a warning, do not enter without clearance. The book also mentioned the symbol I'd seen warding mark, tied to old stories about the land choosing people to speak for it. Back at the hospital that night, the air felt heavier, the lights dimmer. I checked the third-floor cameras again, but they were still static, a gray snowstorm where room 317 should be. I avoided the ward, sticking to my rounds, but the scratching started again, louder, coming through the walls. Patients complained of nightmare shadows in their rooms, voices whispering their names. Mrs. Keller, an elderly woman in room 204, grabbed my arm as I adjusted her for. "It's singing," she whispered, her eyes wide. "Up there, in the quiet place. Don't listen, Avery." I brushed it off, told her it was the meds, but her words stuck with me, a cold knot in my stomach. Around 2 a.m., I found a note on the nurse's station, slipped under a chart. It was in my handwriting, but I hadn't written it. "Go to 317. It's waiting." My blood ran cold. I tore the note up, my hands shaking, and threw it in the trash. But the scratching grew louder, more insistent, and the lights flickered, plunging the hall into darkness for a split second. When they came back on, the trash can was empty, the note gone. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I took the stairs to the third floor, my flashlight cutting through the gloom. The hall was colder than before, the air thick with that sweet, rotten smell. The symbol on room 317's door was deeper now, the spiral glistening like it was wet. I tried the keypad, punching in random codes, but it wouldn't budge. The scratching stopped, replaced by a low hum, like a choir tuning up, coming from inside. "My name?" whispered soft and slow. "Avery, come." I backed away, my heart hammering, and ran back to the station. I called Ed, but his radio was off. I tried the hospital's main line, but it was dead, just static and a faint hum that matched the one in my head. I searched the records room, looking for anything on room 317. Most of the files were missing, but I found a locked drawer in the back, its key taped under the desk. Inside was a single folder labeled Ward 317 Restricted. It held patient logs, but the names were redacted, replaced with numbers. Patient 12, admitted 1,943, non-responsive, transferred to 317. Disappeared. Patient 27, admitted 1,968, heard voices, transferred to 317. No record of discharge. Dozens of entries, all the Semino outcomes, just gone. The last page was a photo, grainy and old, showing a nurse standing in front of room 317's door, her face blurred, the spiral symbol carved into her hand. I didn't sleep after my shift. I drove to Missoula, to a friend's house, needing distance, needing answers. Rachel, my historian friend, met me at a coffee shop, her laptop open to scans of old documents. "St. Agnes was a dumping ground," she said, her voice low. "People who didn't fit mental cases, drifters, anyone the town didn't want, they sent them to 317. No one came back. The Harts, the family who built it, they believed the land was alive, that it needed voices to speak through. That symbol you saw, it's in their journals. They called it a key." I told her about the scream, the hum, the note. Her face paled. "Get out of Haven's End, Avery. That place, it's not just haunted, it's hungry." I went back, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stay away. The hum was in me now, a constant drone, pulling me back to the hospital. That night, the third floor was different. The lights were out, the hall lit only by a faint glow from under room 317's door. The scratching was gone, but the hum was louder, a song without words, weaving through my thoughts. I found another note on the station, in my handwriting again. Open the door. This time, I didn't tear it up. I walked to room 317, my flashlight trembling, the spiral symbol glowing faintly, like it was alive. The keypad beeped, accepting a code I didn't know 243, the time I'd heard the scream. The door clicked open, revealing a room that shouldn't exist. It wasn't a hospital room, no bed, no equipment, just a bare concrete floor and walls covered in spirals, hundreds of them pulsing with that same sickly light. In the center was a hole, a jagged pit in the floor, the hum pouring out of it like a living thing. I saw shapes in the dark faces, hands, eyes watching me, their mouths moving, singing my name. I don't know how long I stood there, the hum filling my mind, drowning out everything. I saw myself in the pit, my face among the others, my voice joining the song. A hand touched my shoulder, cold and heavy, and a voice whispered, "You're home." It wasn't human, not anymore, but it knew me, knew everything about me. I screamed, or thought I did, and ran, the door slamming shut behind me. I left Haven's End that morning, my car packed with what little I owned. I'm in Minneapolis now, crashing on Rachel's couch, but the hum follows me. It's quieter, but it's there, in my dreams. In the silence between heartbeats, I find spirals everywhere on my apartment door, in the margins of my notebooks, etched into my skin when I wake up. Last night, I found a chart in my bag, one I didn't write. Patient 84, Avery Cole, admitted to 317, singing, "I don't know what lives in St. Agnes, or what it wants, but it's not done with me." If you're ever in Haven's End, if you hear a scream at 2:43 a.m., don't go to the third floor. Don't open the door. Because once the silent word calls you, it never lets you go. The door at the end of the hall. The knocking woke me at 3:13 a.m. 3 sharp raps, deliberate and slow, coming from the door at the end of the hall in my new apartment in Black Hollow, Vermont. I'm Riley Kane, a graphic designer who'd fled Boston after a burnout left me hollowed out, chasing cheap rent and solitude in a town so small it barely registered on a map. The apartment was a Stila second-floor flat in a sagging Victorian house, its paint peeling like old skin, its windows rattling in the October wind. The landlord, a wiry man named Mr. Harrow, had handed me the keys with a warning, "Don't bother with the door at the end of the hall. It's locked. Always has been." I'd nodded, too tired to care, but that night, the knocking changed everything. The sound wasn't loud, but it was wrong too, precise, too measured, like someone was testing the door's strength. I lay in bed, my heart thudding, staring at the ceiling where shadows danced in the moonlight. The apartment was quiet otherwise, the kind of quiet that feels alive, pressing against your eardrums. I waited, breath held, for another knock. Nothing. Just the faint creak of the old house settling, or so I told myself. But sleep wouldn't come. The air felt thick, heavy with the smell of dust and something sharper, like wet iron. I got up, my bare feet cold on the hardwood, and crept to the hallway. The hall was narrow, its wallpaper faded to a sickly yellow, curling at the edges. At the far end, maybe 20 feet away, was the door Mr. Harrow had mentioned plain wood, no knob, just a rusted keyhole and a faint crack running down its center. I'd barely noticed it when I moved in, assuming it led to storage or a sealed-off room. Now, it seemed to loom, the shadows around it deeper, almost liquid. I stood there, my phone's flashlight casting a weak beam, and listened. No knocking, no sound, just the hum of my own pulse. But as I turned away, I saw a faint scratch on the doorframe, thin and jagged, like a claw mark. I didn't sleep after that. The next morning, I called Mr. Harrow, my voice shaky as I asked about the door. "Told you, don't bother with it," he snapped, his tone clipped. "Old house, old quirks. Leave it be." He hung up before I could press him. I tried to focus on work, setting up my laptop in the cramped living room, but my eyes kept drifting to the hall. The scratch was still there, deeper than I'd thought, and beside it was another, fresher, like it had been carved while I was on the phone. Black Hollow was a ghost of a town, a cluster of clapboard houses and a general store that doubled as a post office, nestled in a valley where the trees grew too dense and the fog never quite lifted. I went to the store that afternoon, hoping to dig up some local gossip. The clerk, an older woman named Esther, with eyes like chipped flint, gave me a tight smile when I mentioned the apartment. Harrow's place, huh? You hear anything odd? She asked, her hands pausing over the register. Just the house settling, I lied, but her smile faltered. Mind the door at the end, she said, her voice low. Folks who live there, they don't stay long. She wouldn't say more, just handed me my change and turned away. Back at the apartment, I couldn't focus. The air felt heavier, the iron smell stronger, seeping from the hall. I searched online for anything about the house, but Black Hollow was a Black Holeno records, no history, just a few mentions of a fire in the 1920s that gutted half the town. The house, though, was older, built in 1890 by a family called the Wickers. They'd vanished by 1900, no trace, no explanation. I found a grainy photo on an obscure blog showing the house in its prime, the door at the end of the hall clearly visible, unmarked, its keyhole glinting like an eye. That night, the knocking came again. 3:13 a.m., 3 raps, slow and deliberate. I didn't move, just lay there, my breath shallow, listening. The knock stopped, but then I heard something worsey whisper, soft and garbled like a voice underwater, coming from the other side of the door. Riley? Open. My name, clear as day, sent a chill down my spine. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone in, but the screen was dead. Its battery drained despite being fully charged an hour ago. I stayed up, sitting on the couch with a kitchen knife, staring at the hall. The whispers didn't stop, weaving through the silence, my name over and over, mixed with words I couldn't catch. By dawn, I was exhausted, my eyes burning, but I went to the door. The scratches were deeper, forming a pattern Nawa spiral with jagged edges, like the one I'd seen in the old photo, carved into the house's foundation. I touched it, and the wood was warm, almost pulsing, like it was alive. I went back to the general store, desperate for answers. Esther was there, but her demeanor had changed colder, her eyes avoiding mine. You heard it, didn't you? She said, not a question. The door calls, folks. Always has. Wickers built it, said it was a way to speak to the valley. Most who hear it leave, some don't. What's behind it? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head. Don't know. Don't want to. Last tenant, girl named Clara, she tried to find out. Found her car down by the river, empty. Door was scratched to hell after that. I left, my mind racing. Back at the apartment, I tried to work, but the whispers were louder now, even in daylight, seeping through the walls. I found more scratches in the windows, the floor, even the back of my laptop, all forming that same spiral. I called a friend, Sam, a journalist in Burlington, and sent him photos of the door, the scratches, the house. He called back an hour later, his voice tense. Riley, those symbols, they're old, tied to stories about the valley. The Wickers thought it was a gate, not to a room, but to something else. Get out of there. I wanted to, but the whispers were in my head now, a constant hum pulling me toward the door. That night, the knocking was louder. 5 raps this time, and the whispers were clearer. A chorus of voices, some soft, some angry, all saying my name. I found a crowbar in the basement and pried at the door, desperate to know to make it stop. The wood splintered, revealing not a room but a staircase descending into darkness. The air was cold, thick with the smell of iron and something sweeter, like decay. The whispers surged, a song without words urging me down. I don't know why I went. My flashlight barely cut through the gloom, the stairs slick with moisture. The walls were stone, rough-hewn, carved with spirals that glowed faintly, pulsing in time with the whispers. The staircase ended in a chamber, vast and echoing, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center was a door, identical to the one upstairs, but larger, its surface black and smooth, like polished obsidian. The whispers came from it, a cacophony of voices, my name woven into their song. I saw shapes in the dark figures, not human, their forms shifting, their eyes glinting like the keyhole upstairs. They didn't move, just watched, their presence heavy, like a hand on my chest. I reached for the door, my hand trembling, and felt it warm, alive, the spirals moving under my fingers. The voices grew louder, and I saw faces in the door's surface, not reflections, but people, their mouths open, their eyes empty, singing. I saw Clara, the tenant Esther mentioned, her face pale, her lips moving. And then I saw myself, my face in the door, my voice joining the chorus. I screamed, or tried to, but the sound was swallowed, the air too thick to breathe. I ran, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing me. I don't know how I made it back to the apartment, but the door at the end of the hall was whole again, unblemished, the scratches gone. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, and drove until the tank was nearly empty. I'm in a motel now, far from Black Hollow, but the whispers follow, faint but persistent, like a song I can't unhear. I find spirals everywhere, on my car, my clothes, my skin, etched so lightly I barely notice until they bleed. Last night, I found a key in my pocket, rusted and heavy, with no lock to fit. The door at the end of the hall is still there, in my dreams, its surface black and alive, calling me back. I don't know what it is, or what it wants, but it knows my name. If you're ever in Black Hollow, if you hear knocking at 3:13 a.m., don't open the door, don't go down the stairs. Because once you see what's waiting, it never lets you go. The Hollow at Duskwood. The wind carried a whisper that wasn't the wind. It came at dusk, a low, sibilant sound that slithered through the trees of Duskwood, a forgotten corner of rural Arkansas where the pines grew twisted and the ground seemed to swallow light. I'm Harper Wells, a folklorist chasing stories of lost places, and I'd come to Duskwood chasing a remora, single yellowed note I'd found tucked inside an old book at a flea market in Little Rock. The note was scrawled in faded ink. Stay out of the hollow. It listens. No signature, no date, just those words, and a crude map pointing to a clearing deep in Duskwood's forest. That whisper, the one that wasn't the wind, hit me the first night I camped there, and it changed everything. Duskwood wasn't a town, not really just a scattering of trailers and a gas station with a flickering sign, nestled in a valley where the air always smelled of damp earth and something sour, like rotting fruit. The locals called the forest the Hollow, a name that carried weight, like a warning you didn't question. I'd driven in with my beat-up camper van, my notebook filled with half-baked theories about old settler tales, expecting to find nothing but trees and maybe a ghost story or two. The map led me to a dirt path off Route 62, barely wide enough for my van, the pines closing in like a tunnel. I parked at the edge of a clearing, the ground soft and spongy, the air heavy with that sour smell. My tent was up by sunset, the sky bruised purple, the forest unnaturally quiet, no birds, no crickets, just the faint rustle of leaves. That's when I heard it, the whisper. It wasn't words, not at first, just a low hum, like a crowd murmuring just out of earshot. I froze, my flashlight trembling in my hand, its beams slicing through the gathering fog. The sound came from the center of the clearing, where a single tree stood, its trunk blackened and gnarled, like it had been burned but somehow still lived. The whisper seemed to pulse from it, curling around me, brushing against my skin like cold fingers. I told myself it was the wind, the trees, anything but what it felt like a voice, calling me closer. I didn't go. I crawled into my tent, zipped it shut, and lay there, heart pounding, listening as the whisper grew louder, forming my name, Harper, come. Sleep didn't come. The whisper faded at dawn, but the forest felt different, the shadows deeper, the air thicker. I checked the clearing in daylight, my boots sinking into the soft earth. The tree was taller than I'd thought, its branches twisted into shapes that looked almost deliberate, like hands reaching down. At its base was a ring of stones, weathered and moss-covered, arranged in a perfect circle. Inside the circle, the ground was bare, not a blade of grass, just dirt that looked too dark, too wet. I took photos, my hands shaky, and noticed a faint carving on the tria spiral with jagged edges, like a wound. It wasn't there last night. I was sure of it. I drove to the gas station, needing coffee and answers. The clerk, an old man named Amos with eyes like clouded glass, watched me warily as I paid. "You're camping in the hollow?" he asked, his voice gravelly. "Heard anything yet?" "Just the wind," I lied, my skin prickling. He leaned closer, his breath sour with tobacco. Ain't the wind. Hollow's got a voice. You hear it. You're marked. Don't go back tonight. He turned away, muttering about fools and their stories, but his hands were shaking as he rang me up. Back at the campsite, I couldn't focus. The whisper was gone, but the clearing felt wrong, like the air was watching me. I searched my van for the note, hoping for clues, but found something else, a second note, tucked under my notebook, in my own handwriting, "Go to the tree." I hadn't written it. I'd have remembered. My stomach twisted, but I couldn't leave. The folklorist in me needed to know, needed to understand what the hollow was hiding. I spent the day digging through my research, old books and scanned documents I'd brought along. Duskwood's history was sparse, but there were whispers of a settlement in the 1800s, a group of families who'd built homes in the hollow and vanished by 1850. The locals blamed disease, but the stories were stranger people hearing voices, walking into the forest, and never coming back. The tree in the clearing was mentioned once, in a journal fragment from a preacher named Elias Ward. The hollow speaks through the tree. It chooses its voices, and they sing forever. The spiral symbol was there too, sketched in the margin, labeled the mark of the listener. That night, the whisper came again, sharper, more insistent, at exactly 3:13 a.m. I woke with a start, my tent zipper undone, the flap flapping in a breeze that wasn't there. The whisper was louder, a chorus now, voices overlapping, some soft, some angry, all calling my name. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped outside, the air cold and heavy, smelling of rot and iron. The tree was glowing faintly, its spiral carving pulsing like a heartbeat. I approached, my boots sinking deeper, the ground almost sucking at my feet. The stones around the tree were different now, rearranged, their surfaces scratched with more spirals, some fresh, some old and weathered. I heard footsteps behind me, soft but deliberate. I spun, the flashlight beam sweeping the clearing. Nothing, just fog and shadows. But the whispers grew louder, and now I could make out words. Harper, join, see. My head throbbed, my vision blurring, like the sound was inside me, tugging at my thoughts. I saw shapes in the fog figures, tall and thin, their faces hidden, moving just out of sight. I ran back to the tent, zipping it shut, but the whispers followed, seeping through the nylon, filling my skull. By morning, I was a wreck, my eyes burning, my hands shaking. I drove to the gas station again, desperate for someone to talk to. Amos was there, but he wouldn't look at me. "You went back," he said, his voice flat. "Saw the tree, didn't you? It's got you now." "What's got me?" I demanded, my voice cracking. He shook his head. "The hollow, it picks people, makes them listen. You'll see." He wouldn't say more, just handed me my coffee and turned away. I went back to the campsite, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't leave. The whisper was in me now, a constant hum pulling me toward the tree. I found more notes in my van, all in my handwriting. Look closer. Touch the mark. Sing. I burned them, but the ashes smelled sweet, like the rot in the clearing. I searched the forest, looking for answers, and found a trapdoor hidden under a pile of leaves, its wood rotted but carved with the same spiral. It led to a tunnel, narrow and damp, the air thick with that iron rot smell. My flashlight flickered, but I went down, the walls closing in, the whispers growing louder, echoing off the stone. The tunnel opened into a chamber, its ceiling low, its walls covered in spirals, hundreds of them glowing faintly. In the center was a pit, black and bottomless, the whispers pouring out like a tide. I saw things in the dark faces, hands, eyes watching me, their mouths moving, singing that wordless song. I recognized one face impossibly, my mother, dead 10 years, her eyes empty, her lips forming my name. I stumbled back, my flashlight falling, its beam spinning across the walls. The whispers surged, and I felt Ida pull, like the pit was reaching for me, unraveling me. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, the tunnel stretching longer than it should, the whispers chasing me. I made it to the van, drove until the gas light blinked, and didn't stop until I was in Little Rock. I'm in a motel now, the city's noise a faint shield against the hum. But it's still there. In my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the hollow. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my notebooks, my skin, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a stone in my pocket, smooth and cold, carved with that jagged spiral. The tree is waiting. I see it when I close my eyes, its branches reaching, its roots curling through my thoughts. I don't know what the hollow is or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in Duskwood, if you hear a whisper that isn't the wind, don't go to the clearing. Don't touch the tree, because once it chooses you, it never lets go. The Villa at Red Pines. The light flickered at exactly 2:47 a.m. Not a power surge, not a loose bulb, but a single, deliberate pulse that made the shadows in the villa twist like living things. I'm Quinn Adler, a travel writer burned out from city life, chasing solitude in Red Pines, a nowhere town in northern Idaho where the forest swallowed the horizon. I'd rented the villa, sprawling century-old house on the edge of town, because it was cheap and promised quiet. The listing called it historic charm, but didn't mention the light in the upstairs window, the one that flickered every night, or the Polaroid I found under the floorboards my first day there, showing a man standing in that same window, his face blurred with the words "Don't look back" scrawled on the back in red ink. That flicker, that photo-a, was the hook that pulled me into something I still can't explain. Red Pines was barely a town. A gas station, a diner with cracked vinyl booths, and a handful of houses clinging to the edge of a forest so dense it seemed to breathe. The villa stood alone, a mile from the nearest neighbor, its stone walls weathered to a dull gray, its windows dark except for that one upstairs, always glowing faintly, even when the power was off. The air around it smelled of pine and something metallic, like blood left to dry. I'd arrived on a chilly October afternoon, the sky heavy with clouds, the wind carrying a faint hum, like a radio tuned to static. The realtor, a nervous woman named Lila, handed me the keys and muttered, "Don't mess with the upstairs. It's particular." I thought she meant the plumbing. Inside, the villa was a time capsule creaking hardwood floors, faded wallpaper with floral patterns curling at the edges, and furniture that smelled of dust and old secrets. The staircase to the second floor was steep, its banister worn smooth, leading to a locked door at the end of the hall. The key didn't work, and Lila's number went straight to voicemail when I tried to call. I set up in the downstairs bedroom, figuring I'd deal with it later. That night, I woke to the flicker too. 47 a.m., the light in the upstairs window pulsing once, then going dark. I checked the breaker, thinking it was a fault, but everything was fine. That's when I found the Polaroid, slipped under a loose floorboard in the living room, the man's blurred face staring out, his hand pressed against the glass. I didn't sleep after that. The house felt alive, the silence too heavy, broken only by the occasional creak of the walls, like footsteps pacing above me. My skin prickled, my mind replaying the Polaroid's warning, "Don't look back." I tried to work, typing up notes for my next article, but my eyes kept drifting to the staircase, to the locked door I hadn't seen yet. The metallic smell was stronger now, seeping from the walls, mixing with the musty scent of old wood. I told myself it was just the house, just my imagination, but the flicker came again the next night. 2:47 a.m. And this time, I heard something a whisper, faint and garbled, like a voice trapped in static, coming from upstairs. "Quinn, see?" I went to the diner the next morning, needing coffee and answers. The waitress, an older woman named Dot, with eyes that didn't blink enough, poured me a cup and leaned in when I mentioned the villa. "You're staying at the old Hartwell place?" she said, her voice low. "Heard anything yet?" "Just the wind," I lied, my hands tightening around the mug. She didn't buy it. That house don't like guests. Last folks who stayed there, a couple from Boise, left after a week. Said the lights kept talking. She wouldn't say more, just shuffled off, muttering about bad ground. I asked around, but the locals were cagey. Their answers, vague stories of the Hartwell family, who'd built the villa in the 1890s and vanished by 1910, of lights that flickered without power, of whispers no one could trace. One man, an old-timer named Cal, grabbed my arm as I left. "Don't look behind you," he said, his breath sour with whiskey. Not when the light goes on. Back at the villa, I couldn't focus. The whisper was louder now, even in daylight, weaving through the hum of the forest outside. I searched the house, looking for clues, and found a trapdoor in the pantry. Its hinges rusted, its wood carved with a spiral symbol jagged, like a scar. I pried it open, the air below cold and damp, smelling of iron and decay. My flashlight revealed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I didn't go down, not then, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting, listening. That night, the flicker came again, 2:47 a.m., but this time the whisper was clearer, my name sharp and insistent. Quinn, come. I climbed the stairs, my heart pounding, the key suddenly working in the locked door. The upstairs hall was long, its wallpaper peeling, the air thick with that metallic smell. At the end was a room, its door ajar, the flickering light spilling out. Inside was a single window, the one I'd seen from below, its glass smeared with something dark, like blood wiped away. On the floor was another Polaroid, showing me standing in that room, my face blank, my eyes too dark. I hadn't taken it, I hadn't been here before. I ran downstairs, locked the door, and shoved the chair against it. The whisper followed, louder now, a chorus of voices, some soft, some angry, all calling my name. I called Lila, but her voicemail was different now, just static, and a faint whisper, my name over and over. I tried to leave, but my car wouldn't start, the engine dead, the dashboard flickering like the light upstairs. The house creaked, the shadows moving, and I found more Polaroids under the couch, in my bag, on the kitchen counterall, showing me in that room, my face wrong, my hands pressed against the window. I went back to the trapdoor, needing answers. The staircase led to a basement, its walls stone, slick with moisture, carved with more spirals, glowing faintly. The air was heavy, the iron decay smell overwhelming. At the far end was a door, black and smooth, like the one upstairs but larger, its surface pulsing with that same sickly light. The whisper came from it, a song now, wordless but alive, pulling me closer. I saw shapes in the dark figures, not human, their forms shifting, their eyes glinting like the Polaroid's flash. They didn't move, just watched, their presence heavy, like a hand on my throat. I touched the door, and it was warm, alive, the spirals moving under my fingers. The voices surged, and I saw faces in the door's surface, not reflections, but people, their mouths open, singing. I saw the man from the first Polaroid, his face clear now, his eyes empty. And then I saw myself, my face in the door, my voice joining the song. I screamed, or tried to, but the sound was swallowed, the air too thick to breathe. I don't know how I got out. I remember running, the stairs endless, the whispers chasing me. I made it to the van, drove until the gaslight blinked, and didn't stop until I was in Spokane. I'm in a motel now, the city's noise, a faint shield against the hum. But it's still there, in my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the villa. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my notebooks, my skin, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a Polaroid in my wallet, showing me in that upstairs room, my face blank, the words, "Don't look back," written in my own handwriting. The villa is waiting. I see it when I close my eyes, its light flickering, its door open, calling me home. I don't know what lives in Red Pines or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in northern Idaho, if you see a villa with a light that flickers at 2:47 a.m., don't stay, don't look at the window. Because once you do, the house never lets you go. The shadow on the sill. The shadow moved at 4:12 a.m. Not a flicker of moonlight or a passing car's headlights, but a deliberate, fluid motion across the windowsill of my rented cabin in Hollow Creek, Kentucky. I'm Mara Tate, a private investigator who'd retreated to this speck of a town to escape a case that went bad real bad in Louisville. I needed quiet, a place to lick my wounds, but Hollow Creek wasn't quiet, not really. The cabin, a weathered box of logs perched on a hill overlooking a dense forest, came with a warning from the owner, a grizzled man named Amos. Don't open the window by the bed. Not ever. I thought he was joking, or maybe just superstitious, until I saw that shadow and found the note slipped under my door the next morning. It saw you. Don't look again. The handwriting wasn't mine, and it wasn't Amos's. Hollow Creek was barely a Tona gas station, a bar with a flickering neon sign and a scattering of homes swallowed by the pines. The air was heavy with the scent of damp moss and something acrid, like burned metal, that clung to the back of my throat. I'd arrived in late October, the sky a bruised gray, the forest so thick it seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. The cabin was cheap, isolated, perfect for disappearing. It had one bedroom, a sagging couch, and a kitchen that smelled of mildew and old grease. The window by the bed, the one Amos warned about, was small, its glass warped, distorting the trees outside into twisted shapes. I'd covered it with a curtain, but that first night I woke to the shadow-long, thin, moving like ink spilling across the sill, pausing as if it knew I was watching. I didn't sleep after that. My heart hammered, my mind replaying the shadow's movement, too smooth, too alive. The cabin was silent, but the silence felt wrong, like it was waiting. I checked the door, the locks, the windows, everything was secure, but the air was thick, heavy with that burned metal smell. I told myself it was a trick of the light, a branch swaying in the wind, but the note under the door changed everything. It was on yellowed paper, the ink fresh, the words jagged, like they'd been written in a hurry. I called Amos, my hands shaking, but his phone went to voicemail, his message a curt, "Leave a message, I'm out." The next day, I drove to the bar, needing answers. The place was dim, smelling of stale beer and cigarette smoke. The bartender, a woman named Ruth with eyes like chipped ice, poured me a coffee and listened as I described the shadow, the note. "You're at the old Whitaker cabin," she said, not a question. "Folks, don't stay there long. That window, it's got a history." "What kind?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Whitakers built that place in the 1880s. Said the forest talked to them through the window. Last Whitaker, a girl named Eliza, disappeared in 92. Left a note like yours," said the shadow was watching. Ruth turned away, busying herself with a rag, but I caught the fear in her eyes. I went back to the cabin, the note burning a hole in my pocket. The forest felt closer now, the trees leaning in, their branches scratching the roof like fingers. I searched the cabin, looking for clues, and found a loose floorboard under the bed. Beneath it was a tin box, rusted and heavy, containing a journal pages, yellowed, ink faded, but the handwriting clear. It belonged to Eliza Whitaker, dated 1992. She wrote about the shadow, how it came every night at 4:12 a.m., how it whispered her name, how it moved inside the window, not outside. The last entry was a single line. "It's not a shadow, it's me." My stomach twisted. I checked the window, the curtain still in place, but the glass was cold, too cold, like it was pulling heat from the room. That night, the shadow came again. 4:12 a.m., sliding across the sill, slow and deliberate, like it was testing the curtain's edge. The whisper followed, soft and guttural, my name woven into a sound that wasn't words. "Mara, look." I didn't. I sat on the couch, my gun in my lap, staring at the curtain, waiting for dawn. But the whisper didn't stop, and by morning, another note was under the door. "You looked. It knows." I hadn't looked. I was sure of it. But the note felt like an accusation, heavy in my hand. I drove to the gas station, hoping to find Amos, but the clerk, a kid with nervous eyes, said he'd been gone for days. "You're at the Whitaker place?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Get out. That window, it ain't right." He wouldn't say more, just handed me my change and turned away. Back at the cabin, I couldn't think straight. The whisper was louder now, even in daylight, a hum that vibrated in my bones. I found more notes under my pillow, in my bag, tucked inside the journal, all in that same jagged handwriting, all saying the same thing. Look. I burned them, but the ashes smelled wrong, sweet and metallic, like the forest itself. I searched the cabin again, finding scratches on the walls, the floor, the window frame thin, precise, forming a spiral pattern that matched one in Eliza's journal, labeled "The Mark of the Watcher." I called a friend, Lena, a retired cop in Louisville, and sent her photos of the notes, the journal, the scratches. She called back, her voice tight. Mara, that symbolite's old, tied to stories about the forest. The Whitakers thought it was a door, not to a place, but to something. Get out of there! Now. I wanted to, but the whisper was in my head, a constant pull, urging me to the window. I covered it with a blanket, nailed it shut, but the shadow came anyway. 4:12 a.m. Moving through the blanket, its form sharper now, like a silhouette of me, but wrong too tall, too thin, its head tilted at an impossible angle. I didn't sleep. I sat by the door, gun in hand, listening as the whisper grew into a chorus, voices overlapping, some soft, some screaming, all saying my name. I found another note, this time inside my coat pocket. You're already here. My handwriting, but not mine. I tore it up, my hands shaking, and decided to leave. I packed my bag, grabbed my keys, but the car wouldn't start, the engine dead, the dashboard flickering like the shadow on the sill. Desperate, I pried open the window frame, needing to know. The glass was smooth, but the wood was warm, pulsing, the spiral scratches glowing faintly. The shadow was there, inside the glass, not outside. Its form shifting, my face staring back, but not my face me. Eyes were empty, my mouth open, whispering. I smashed the window, the glass shattering, but the shadow didn't move. It reached out, its fingers brushing the air, and I felt Ida tug, like something pulling at my core, unraveling me. I ran, leaving everything, my bag, my gun, my sanity. The forest was a blur, the trees closing in, their branches snagging my clothes. I made it to the gas station, hitchhiked to Lexington, and didn't stop until I was in a motel. The city's noise, a faint shield against the whisper. But it's still there. In my head, in my dreams, calling me back to the cabin. I find spirals everywhere on my door, my skin, my mirror, etched so lightly they bleed before I notice. Last night, I found a note in my wallet, in my handwriting. Look behind you. I don't look. I can't. But the shadow is there, in every reflection, every dark corner, waiting. I see it when I close my eyes. Its form sharper, my face clearer, whispering my name. I don't know what lives in Hollow Creek, or what it wants, but it knows me. If you're ever in Kentucky, if you see a cabin with a window that doesn't look right, don't stay. Don't look at the sill. Because once the shadow sees you, it never lets you go. The last guest at the Starlight Motel. The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat, casting a sickly pink glow over the cracked asphalt of the Starlight Motel's parking lot. I found the place by accident, or so I thought, when my car broke down on a lonely stretch of Route 17 in rural Nevada. My name's Nora Quinn, a freelance journalist chasing a story about forgotten towns in the Mojave Desert. It was October, the air sharp with the scent of sagebrush and dust, and I was stranded, my old Honda Civic coughing its last breath 10 miles from anywhere. The motel was the only sign of life, a squat, U-shaped building with peeling paint and a half-lit sign that read, Starlight Motel, Vacancy. Below it, in smaller letters, someone had scrawled in marker, last room left. I grabbed my backpack and trudged toward the office, the gravel crunching under my boots. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint buzz of the neon and a distant coyote's howl. The office door creaked as I pushed it open, releasing a musty smell of stale coffee and cigarette smoke. A bell above the door jingled, too loud in the quiet. Behind the counter sat a man, gaunt and pale, his eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in years. His name tag read, Cliff. He didn't look up from the crossword puzzle he was scribbling in, but his voice was low, raspy. Last room's yours, number 13, keys on the hook. I glanced at the wall behind him, where a single key dangled from a rusted hook, the tag marked 13 in faded red ink. You don't need my name or anything? I asked, fishing for my wallet. He shook his head, still not looking up. Don't need it. Just sign the book. He slid a leather-bound ledger across the counter, its pages yellowed and curling. I scrawled my name, noticing the last entry was dated 3 months ago. John Doe, room 13. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged like it had been written in a hurry. I handed over a 20, but Cliff waved it away. First night's free, you'll need it. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning I couldn't grasp. I took the key, its metal cold against my palm, and headed to room 13. The motel was eerily quiet. The other rooms dark, their curtains drawn tight. My room was at the far end of the U, its door slightly ajar, as if someone had just left. The air inside was damp, smelling of mildew and something metallic, like old pennies. A single bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows across the faded wallpaper. The bed was made, but the sheets were threadbare, stained with faint brown spots. A rotary phone sat on the nightstand, its cord frayed, and a small mirror hung above a chipped sink. I locked the door, double-checked it, and tried to shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. I called a tow truck, but the line crackled, the operator's voice fading in and out. "Nearest truck's in Reno," she said. "Might be a day or two." I hung up, frustrated, and lay on the bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. That's when I heard a faint tapping, like fingers drumming on glass. It came from the window, but when I pulled the curtain back, there was nothing, just the empty parking lot and the neon signs flicker. The tapping stopped, then started again, this time from the mirror. I froze, my reflection staring back, but it felt wrong, like the face wasn't quite mine. My eyes looked too wide, my skin too pale. I covered the mirror with a towel, telling myself it was just exhaustion. Sleep didn't come easy. The tapping continued, irregular but persistent, now joined by a low hum, like a refrigerator running in another room. I pulled the pillow over my head, but the sound burrowed into my skull, vibrating in my teeth. Around midnight, the phone rang, a shrill, jarring sound that made me bolt upright. I hesitated, then picked it up. Static crackled, thick and heavy, but beneath it, I heard a voice as soft, almost a whisper, saying, "My name, Nora, stay." I slammed the receiver down, my heart pounding. The hum stopped, but the silence was worse, thick and suffocating, like the room was holding its breath. The next morning, I went back to the office, determined to get answers. Cliff was there, still hunched over his crossword as if he hadn't moved. "Who else is staying here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I heard noises last night." He didn't look up. "Just you. Last guest checked out months ago." "But the ledger?" "Folks come and go," he said, his pencil scratching the paper. "Room 13 special, always the last one taken." I pressed him, but he wouldn't say more. Just pointed me to a diner across the road for breakfast. The diner was a relic, its chrome stools rusted, its formica counters chipped. The waitress, a woman with gray hair and a permanent frown, poured me coffee that tasted like tar. I asked about the motel, hoping for some local gossip. Her eyes narrowed. "Starlight? You're staying there?" She leaned in, her voice low. "Get out before dark. That place, it don't let go of everyone." She wouldn't elaborate, just shuffled away, muttering about bad ground. I left a tip and headed back, my unease growing. The motel felt different in daylight, the shadows sharper, the air heavier. I decided to poke around, see if I could find anything about room 13 or the strange noises. The other rooms were locked, their windows boarded or covered with grime. But behind the motel, hidden by overgrown sagebrush, I found a storm cellar, its doors padlocked but rusted through. I pried them open with a crowbar from my car, the hinges screaming in protest. The cellar was dark, the air thick with the smell of wet earth and decay. My flashlight revealed shelves lined with jars, their contents murky, floating in cloudy liquid. Old furniture was stacked against the wall shares, a dresser, a cracked mirror like the one in my room. In the corner, under a tarp, was a box of papers. Receipts, maintenance logs, and a guest ledger, different from the one in the office. Its pages were filled with names, all for room 13, dating back decades. Each entry had a note beside it. Didn't leave, gone by morning, heard the song. My name was there too, in my own handwriting, dated yesterday. But I hadn't written in this ledger. I'd signed the one in the office. My hands shook as I stuffed the ledger into my backpack. I needed to get out, tow truck or not. But as I climbed out of the cellar, I heard it again, the tapping, louder now, coming from the direction of my room. I ran back, my boots slipping on the gravel, and found the door to room 13 wide open. Inside, the mirror was uncovered, the towel neatly folded on the bed. My reflection stared back, but it wasn't right. My eyes were wrong, too dark, and my mouth was moving, humming a tune I didn't know. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the car, but the key wouldn't turn. The engine sputtered, then died, the dashboard lights flickering like the neon sign. The tapping was everywhere now, on the windows, the roof, the hood, a relentless rhythm that matched the hum in my head. I stumbled out, the desert air cold against my skin, and ran toward the highway, hoping to flag down a car. But the road was empty. The horizon swallowed by a creeping fog that hadn't been there an hour ago. I don't know how long I walked, but the motel kept appearing, no matter which direction I went. The neon sign glowed brighter, the words, "Last room left," pulsing like a lure. I tried to call for help, but my phone was dead. Its screen cracked, showing a photo I hadn't taken. Me standing in room 13, my face blank, my hands pressed against the mirror. Desperate, I went back to the office. Cliff was gone, the crossword abandoned, half finished. The ledger was open, my name now circled in red ink with a new note, singing. I tore through the office, looking for anything, a phone, a map, a way out. In a drawer, I found a Polaroid, faded but clear. A woman in room 13, her face pale, her eyes empty, standing in front of the mirror. On the back, in the same shaky handwriting as the ledger, "She stayed too long." The hum was louder now, a song without words, pulling me back to room 13. I fought it, my nails digging into my palms, but my feet moved anyway, step by step, until I was standing in the room again. The mirror was waiting, its surface rippling like water. My reflection smiled, but I wasn't smiling. It raised a hand, beckoning, and I felt a tug, not just in my mind, but in my chest, like something was unraveling inside me. I don't know how I broke free. I remember screaming, smashing the mirror with the phone, glass shattering across the floor. The hum stopped, the room silent, but the air was thick, heavy with the scent of blood. I ran, leaving everything, my bag, my car, my sanity. I hitchhiked to Reno, my hands trembling, my mind replaying the song I couldn't shake. I told myself it was over, that I'd escaped. But it's not over. The hum is still there, faint but growing, like a radio signal tuning in. At night, I see the motel in my dreams, the neon sign flickering, the mirror whole again, my reflection waiting. Last week, I found a key in my pocket, rusted and cold, marked 13. I live in a city now, far from the desert, but yesterday, I saw Ita neon sign in an alley, flickering pink, the words, "Last room left," glowing in the dark. I don't sleep anymore. The song is louder, and sometimes I catch myself humming along, my voice, not my own. I don't know what the Starlight Motel is, or what it wants, but it's not done with me. If you're ever on Route 17, if you see a neon sign in the desert, keep driving. Don't stop. Don't take the key, because once you check into room 13, you never check out. The Hollow Choir. The rain came down in sheets, a relentless gray curtain that blurred the world beyond the windshield. I was driving home from a weekend in Portland, my headlights cutting weak beams through the storm as I navigated the winding backroads of Southern Oregon. The radio had long since fizzled into static, leaving only the rhythmic thump of wipers and the hiss of tires on wet asphalt. I was tired, bone tired after a fight with my girlfriend that had left me raw and restless. Maybe that's why I didn't notice the sign at first. It was small, rusted, leaning crookedly at the edge of the road like it had been forgotten for decades. Hollow Creek, 3 miles. I frowned, squinting through the rain. I'd driven this route 100 times, and I'd never seen a turnoff for any place called Hollow Creek. My GPS was useless out here, the screen stuck on a loading spiral, so I figured it was just an old logging road or some ghost town marker. Still, something about it tugged at me, a faint, uneasy pull, like a whisper you can't quite hear but feel in your chest. I kept driving, the sign fading into the rearview mirror, but the name stuck with me. Hollow Creek. It sounded wrong, like a name you'd find scratched into the bark of a tree in a place nobody goes. 10 minutes later, the rain got worse. A deluge that turned the road into a river. My old Civic started to hydroplane, the wheel jerking in my hands. I cursed, slowing to a crawl, when my headlights caught something up ahead, a flicker of white through the trees. It was a figure, a woman maybe, standing motionless at the edge of the road. She was dressed in something pale, a dress or a nightgown, soaked through and clinging to her skin. Her hair hung in dark, wet strands over her face, and she was just standing there, head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something I couldn't hear. My stomach twisted. This was the middle of nowhere, miles from any house or gas station. Nobody should be out here, not in this storm. I slowed